Welcome back, coin hunters and collectors. Money today, we're diving into the exciting world of Lincoln Memorial 1-cent coins from the United States of America. These familiar pennies may look ordinary at first glance, but some examples can become highly desirable collectibles because of unusual varieties, minting errors, exceptional preservation, and strong collector demand. The big question is, could one of these pennies be worth far more than 1 cent? In today's market, collectors carefully examine Lincoln Memorial cents for details that separate an everyday coin from an interesting and potentially valuable example. As we go through these coins, we'll discuss their history, important identifying features, condition and grading, and the factors that can influence their current market value. So grab your change jar, check your old penny collection, and look closely, because the smallest details can sometimes make the biggest difference. Let's get started. First up, the 1968 Lincoln Memorial 1-cent coin is an interesting piece of American numismatic history, especially for collectors who enjoy searching older Lincoln cents for unusual varieties, attractive condition, and valuable proof examples. The coin carries the famous portrait of President Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, while the reverse features the Lincoln Memorial design that defined the Lincoln Memorial cent series, beginning in 1959. The S mint mark beneath the date identifies the San Francisco Mint. In 1968, San Francisco produced both regular circulation strike Lincoln cents and proof cents, so simply seeing an S does not automatically mean that every 1968 cent is a proof. PCGS records a proof mintage of 3,041,506 pieces, while historical mintage records list 258,270,001 regular 1968 cents, making the distinction between a normal circulation strike and a proof especially important. The 1968 cent belongs to the second major design era of the Lincoln cent series. Victor David Brenner's portrait of Abraham Lincoln remained on the obverse, while Frank Gasparo's Lincoln Memorial reverse appeared for the first time in 1959. This change was introduced to commemorate the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. On the front of the 1968 coin, collectors should examine Lincoln's portrait, the date 1968, the words Liberty and In God We Trust, and most importantly the small S mint mark. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial dominates the design, with United States of America, EPLURBUSUNUM, and 1 cent surrounding the building. Although millions of these cents were made, the coin can become much more interesting when its condition, finish, color, strike, or variety separates it from ordinary examples. One of the most important things to understand about the 1968 Lincoln Memorial cent is that its value is not determined simply by its age. A coin from 1968 is now more than half a century old, but age alone does not make it rare or automatically valuable. The real collector interest comes from condition, eye appeal, original surfaces, proof characteristics, and recognized varieties. PCGS lists several collectible versions of the 1968 proof cent, including Red RD, Cameo CAM, and Deep Cameo DCAM designations. PCGS also catalogs a 1968 double die obverse, F-101 variety. These distinctions can make a major difference when comparing an ordinary circulated coin with a professionally certified high-grade or variety example. If you have a dusty or old-looking 1968 cent, do not immediately assume that the dirt or discoloration makes it rare. Instead, inspect the coin carefully without cleaning it. Start on the obverse and locate the S beneath the date. Then examine the surfaces for unusual doubling, especially around the lettering and date, while remembering that machine doubling and ordinary strike characteristics can be mistaken for true doubled dies. Next, look at the overall finish. A genuine proof can have highly reflective fields and sharply defined design elements, while a normal circulation strike generally has a different surface appearance. PCGS specifically recognizes 1968 proof varieties and the F-101 double die variety, so a coin with unusual characteristics should be compared carefully with authoritative references before assigning it a high value. The condition of your 1968 cent can have an enormous effect on what collectors are willing to pay. A heavily circulated example with scratches, discoloration, corrosion, or damaged surfaces may be worth little more than its basic collectible value, while a sharply struck coin with attractive original color and minimal marks can be considerably more desirable. For proof coins, professional grading and designations such as PR, CAM, and DCAM are particularly important. A high-grade certified example can be dramatically more valuable than an ordinary circulated coin. This is why collectors should never judge a coin's value simply by looking at a large dollar figure associated with a rare example online. The grade, certification, exact variety, finish, color designation, and auction history all need to match. When discussing the current market, it is important to separate ordinary 1968s cents from exceptional certified pieces. PCGS currently records historic auction results for 1968s proof cents that demonstrate how high-grade examples can attract substantial collector interest. For the regular red proof category, PCGS lists an auction record of $14,375 for a PR67 example sold by Heritage Auctions in January 2004. For the deep cameo category, PCGS lists an auction record of $3,795 for a PR69 example sold in November 2002, while the cameo category has a listed auction record of $2,760 for a PR63 example sold in 2007. These are historical auction records, not guaranteed prices for a coin you find today. Another fascinating feature to investigate is the 1968s double die obverse, identified by PCGS as F-101. Doubled dies are created during the die-making process and can produce genuine doubling on parts of the design. This is completely different from a coin that merely has damage, wear, die deterioration, or machine doubling. PCGS records a 1968s DDO F-101 variety and lists a historic auction record of $517 for a PR68 example sold by Heritage Auctions in August 2015. That figure illustrates why varieties must be identified accurately. Even within the same year and mint mark, one variety can have a very different collector market from another. If your old 1968s cent appears to show unusual doubling, avoid polishing or cleaning it, and consider having the variety examined by an experienced numismatist or professional grading service. So how much could a 1968s Lincoln Memorial 1-cent coin be worth today? The answer depends entirely on what you actually have. A normal circulated 1968s cent is generally not a $1,000 coin simply because it is old and carries an S mint mark. However, exceptional proof coins, high-grade certified specimens, and recognized varieties can reach hundreds, or, in outstanding historical auction examples, thousands of dollars. The documented PCGS auction records show that exceptional 1968s proofs have reached several $1,000s, including the $14,375 record for a PR67 red proof. Therefore, if you discover a 1968s Lincoln cent in an old collection, dusty box, inherited coin group, or jar of coins, take a close look before spending it. Check the mint mark, surface quality, proof characteristics, color, possible doubling, and overall condition. Most importantly, do not clean the coin, because cleaning can damage original surfaces and reduce collector appeal. And remember, market values change according to grade, certification, variety, surface condition, color designation, authenticity, and actual auction results. The high prices mentioned in this video are examples of exceptional coins, not a guarantee that every 1968s Lincoln Memorial cent will sell for hundreds or thousands of dollars. Next up, the 1969 Lincoln Memorial 1-cent coin, a fascinating piece of American coinage that has been around for more than half a century. This coin was struck at the Denver Mint, which is identified by the small D mint mark located on the obverse side of the coin beneath the date. The 1969 cent belongs to the Lincoln Memorial Cent series, which began in 1959 to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. The obverse features Victor David Brenner's famous portrait of Abraham Lincoln, while the reverse features Frank Gasparo's depiction of the Lincoln Memorial. In 1969, the Denver Mint produced approximately 4,2,832,200 Lincoln cents, so the coin was not rare simply because of its date or D-mint mark. However, what makes individual examples interesting to collectors is their condition, color, strike quality, errors, and die varieties. A dusty, circulated 1969 cent may look like an ordinary old penny, but collectors know that the details can make a major difference in its desirability and value. The 1969 Lincoln Memorial cent has several recognizable characteristics that can help you identify it correctly. The coin has a diameter of approximately 19 millimeters, weighs about 3.11 grams, and has a plain edge. Its composition is a copper alloy containing approximately 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, consistent with the bronze Lincoln cents of this period. On the obverse, you should see Abraham Lincoln facing right, with the inscriptions "In God We Trust," Liberty, and the date 1969. Directly below the date, the small d identifies the Denver Mint. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial dominates the center, surrounded by United States of America, EPLUOBUSUNUM, and 1 cent. If your coin has been stored in a dusty environment, dirt and discoloration may hide some of these details. Before judging its condition, it is important not to aggressively clean or polish the coin, because cleaning can damage the original surface and potentially reduce collector interest. When people discover an old 1960-90 penny in a box, jar, drawer, collection, or inherited group of coins, they often assume that dust or dark coloration automatically means the coin is worthless. That is not necessarily true. A dusty coin can still be collectible, particularly if it has an unusual die variety, an error, an exceptionally strong strike, or unusually high remaining detail. However, it is important to separate the idea of an old coin from the idea of a rare coin. The 1960-90 issue had a very large production run, so an ordinary circulated example generally does not command a huge premium. Current reference values show that typical 1960-90 cents can remain close to face value in circulated grades, while uncirculated examples can bring more depending on grade and color. The real opportunity comes from finding a coin with something unusual. That is why collectors inspect the date, mint mark, lettering, Lincoln's portrait, memorial details, surfaces, color, and possible die characteristics rather than judging a coin only by its age or appearance. Condition is one of the most important factors determining the market value of a 1960-90 Lincoln cent. Professional collectors generally look at the amount of wear, original luster, marks, scratches, carbon spots, strike quality, and overall eye appeal. Copper cents can also receive color designations such as brown BN, red-brown RB, or red RD, and that distinction can have a substantial effect on value, particularly in high grades. PCGS notes that high-grade 1960-90 cents can be difficult to locate, with many examples affected by carbon spots, planchet problems, nicks, scratches, and other surface issues. This is particularly important when examining a dusty coin, because dirt can make the surface look worse than it actually is, but cleaning it yourself can create an even bigger problem. Instead, collectors should examine the coin under good lighting and magnification, and look for original surfaces and remaining mint luster. A professional grading service may be appropriate when a coin appears unusually strong or potentially valuable, but grading fees should always be considered before submitting an ordinary circulated penny. So how much could a 1960-90 Lincoln Memorial cent be worth today? The answer depends heavily on condition, color, variety, certification, and actual market demand. Current reference information places ordinary examples at relatively modest levels, while uncirculated coins can be worth more. For example, USA Coin Book currently lists an estimated value of about $1.24 or more for an uncirculated 1960-90 example, while PCGS auction information shows a recorded $191 sale for an MS65 brown example. These figures demonstrate why it is misleading to say that every 1960-90 penny is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. Most circulated examples will not reach those levels. A particularly desirable high-grade coin, a rare variety, or an important error can be substantially more valuable, but those are special cases. Therefore, if you find a dusty 1960-90 penny, the safest approach is to preserve it, identify it correctly, examine its condition, and compare it with documented sales rather than assuming that the coin automatically has a large value. One of the most interesting areas to investigate on a 1960-90 cent is the No FG variety, catalogued by PCGS as F-901. The letters FG refer to the initials of designer Frank Gasparo, which normally appear near the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. PCGS lists 1960-90 No FG examples in different color and grade categories, making this a variety worth learning about. A certified 1960-90 No FG F-901 red example has a documented PCGS auction record of $505 for an MS65 RD coin, while another No FG example in red-brown recorded $154 in MS63 RB. These sales are excellent examples of how a specific variety and high grade can dramatically change the value of an otherwise common date, but viewers should be careful. Simply failing to see the FG initials on a dirty or poorly struck coin does not automatically prove that it is the valuable No FG variety. Authentication and professional attribution can be important when the details appear promising. If you have a dusty 1960-90 penny, begin your inspection with the basics. Confirm that the date really reads 1969 and that the D mint mark is present beneath the date. Next, examine Lincoln's portrait for unusual doubling, die damage, or other characteristics. Turn the coin over and carefully inspect the Lincoln memorial, especially the area where the designer's initials FG normally appear. Also check the lettering, date, rims, and surfaces for unusual mint errors or die varieties. Do not confuse ordinary damage, scratches, corrosion, or environmental discoloration with a valuable mint error. The PCGS information on the standard 1960-90 cent specifically notes that many examples suffer from surface problems and planchet imperfections, so a worn or spotted appearance alone does not make the coin rare. If your coin appears unusually sharp, has strong original red color, or shows a potentially legitimate variety, obtaining an opinion from a reputable coin dealer or professional grading service may be worthwhile. Always compare actual sold examples, because asking prices on online listings are not the same as confirmed market prices. The 1960-90 Lincoln Memorial Cent is a great example of why coin collecting is about much more than simply finding an old date. With more than 4 billion examples struck at Denver, the standard 1960-90 cent is not considered rare in ordinary circulated condition. Nevertheless, condition rarity, exceptional mint state quality, color varieties such as the No FGF-901, and genuine mint errors can create significant collector interest. A dusty circulated coin may be worth only a small amount above face value, while a certified high-grade or recognized variety can reach the hundreds of dollars, as documented auction records demonstrate. So before you spend, clean, or throw away a 1960-90 penny, take a moment to examine it carefully. Remember that a large dollar figure should never be presented as a guaranteed value for every coin. The true market value depends on the exact coin, its grade, color, variety, authenticity, certification, and what buyers are actually willing to pay at the time of sale. If you have a 1960-90 Lincoln Memorial Cent, preserve the original surface, study the details, and let the evidence determine whether you have an ordinary vintage penny or something genuinely special. Next up, the 1975D Lincoln Memorial 1 cent, a United States penny that is now more than 50 years old and carries a fascinating place in American coinage history. The D mint mark beneath the date identifies this coin as having been struck at the Denver Mint. The coin belongs to the Lincoln Memorial Cent series, which began in 1959 when the reverse design was changed from the famous wheat ears to an image of the Lincoln Memorial. The obverse continued to feature Abraham Lincoln's portrait, originally designed by Victor David Brenner, while Frank Gasparo created the memorial reverse. According to NGC specifications, the 1975 cent is approximately 19 millimeters in diameter, weighs about 3.11 grams, and has a plain edge. The year 1975 itself is historically interesting because the United States was approaching its bicentennial era, and millions of Americans were using coins like this in everyday transactions. So although a normal 1975 cent is not automatically a rare treasure, it represents an important period in American history and remains collectible when its condition, color, strike, or variety makes it stand out from ordinary examples. One of the most recognizable features of the 1975 Lincoln Cent is the classic Lincoln Memorial design. On the obverse, you will see Abraham Lincoln facing right, along with the inscriptions Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date 1975. Just below the date is the small D mint mark, which is the key identifier for the Denver issue. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial dominates the design, with United States of America, EPLURBUSUNUM, and 1 cent surrounding the building. This design had already become familiar to generations of Americans by 1975. Collectors often pay particular attention to the sharpness of Lincoln's portrait, the details around the memorial, the lettering, and the overall quality of the surfaces. A coin that has been heavily circulated, scratched, stained, or damaged will generally be worth little more than face value, while an unusually attractive example with strong details and original red color can command a premium. This distinction is extremely important for anyone searching through an old collection, jar of coins, or inherited group of pennies. The biggest mistake a collector can make is assuming that every old penny is automatically rare. The 1975 cent was not produced as a tiny, mysterious issue, so the date and mint mark alone do not make every example valuable. Instead, collectors look for condition, exceptional preservation, varieties, and genuine mint errors. NGC's current guide shows very modest values for ordinary examples across circulated grades, while the higher mint state grades rise gradually as quality becomes more difficult to find. This means the real story is not simply 1975D equals rare, it is which 1975D cent do you actually have. Look carefully for unusually sharp details, minimal contact marks, attractive original color, and unusual mint-made characteristics. A genuine error can change the equation dramatically, because an error coin can attract specialists who are willing to pay significantly more than they would for a normal example. One documented 1975D example, with a double-struck and broad-struck error graded MS65 Brown by NGC sold for $168 at Heritage Auctions in 2019, illustrating how a special mint error can bring a much stronger price than an ordinary 1975D cent. When determining the value of a 1975D Lincoln Memorial cent, condition is one of the most important factors. Collectors and professional grading companies use a numerical grading scale to describe preservation, with circulated coins ranging from heavily worn grades upward and uncirculated coins receiving mint state grades such as MS60, MS65, MS66 and higher. A good condition coin may show wear on Lincoln's hair and cheek, while a higher grade uncirculated coin can preserve much sharper details and cleaner surfaces. Original color can also matter. Lincoln cents are commonly categorized by color designations such as brown, and red, with original red coloration generally being more desirable in high grades. NGC's 1975D data demonstrates just how much grade can affect the listed value, with the guide increasing from very small amounts in circulated grades to several dollars in the upper mint state range. Therefore, if your 1975D penny is dusty or circulated, do not assume that simply being old makes it worth hundreds or thousands. On the other hand, if you discover an exceptionally preserved coin, especially one with a recognized error or variety, it deserves much closer examination. Now let's talk about money, because this is where many coin videos can become misleading. Based on current published pricing information, an ordinary 1975D Lincoln cent is generally a low-value coin, even though it is collectible. NGC's current guide lists values from only a few cents in circulated grades and rising into the single-digit dollar range at the upper mint state levels shown on its guide. However, exceptional examples can bring more. PCGS auction database records a 1975D MS67 red that sold for $132, while the listed PCGS price guide value on that record is $175. Another 1975D MS66 red example sold for $25 in an earlier Great Collections auction. These real auction results show an important lesson. Even very high-grade normal examples do not automatically sell for hundreds or thousands of dollars. The strongest prices generally require something special, an extraordinary grade, a major recognized error, a scarce variety, or another characteristic that creates genuine collector demand. This is the question many viewers will be waiting for. Could a 1975D Lincoln Memorial cent really be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars? The answer is possible for an extraordinary error or variety, but not for an ordinary circulated coin. A normal 1975D cent should not be advertised as a guaranteed hundreds or thousands dollar coin. The documented double-struck and broad-struck MS65 Brown example mentioned earlier reached $168, showing that a dramatic mint error can substantially increase value. But collectors should be extremely cautious about online claims involving enormous prices. A coin must have genuine evidence behind the value, preferably through recognized auction records, professional attribution, or reputable grading. NGC's auction data for the regular 1975D issue reports an all-year's average auction price of $147.19 across 166 records, with an average grade of MS65, but that statistic covers auctioned examples and should not be interpreted as the value of every 1975D penny. In other words, a spectacular coin can be valuable, but an ordinary worn 1975D is usually not a hidden fortune. If you have a 1975D Lincoln Memorial cent in your possession, do not clean it before evaluating it. Cleaning can leave scratches or unnatural surfaces and may reduce collector appeal. Instead, examine the coin under good lighting and use a magnifying glass to inspect the date, the D-mint mark, Lincoln's portrait, and the reverse memorial. Look for signs of doubling, unusual striking, missing design elements, off-center striking, broad striking, die cracks, or other characteristics that appear to have occurred during minting rather than after the coin entered circulation. Be especially careful with damage caused by machines, chemicals, corrosion, or deliberate alterations, because these are not the same as genuine mint errors. If your coin appears exceptionally preserved or shows a potentially important error, professional authentication and grading may be worth considering. The documented 1975D error auction is a perfect example of why attribution matters. The coin's special characteristics were part of the reason it brought a price far above that of an ordinary cent. So as we reach the end of today's look at the 1975D Lincoln Memorial 1 cent, remember the most important point. This is a historically interesting American coin, but the majority of 1975D cents are not worth hundreds or thousands of dollars simply because they are old. Current published guides show ordinary examples at modest values, while documented auction results demonstrate that high-grade and especially error examples can bring stronger premiums. The best opportunity for a collector is to search for the exceptional coin hidden among ordinary ones, an unusually high-grade example, a beautiful original red coin, or a genuine and significant mint error. If your 1975D cent is simply worn and dusty from years of circulation, its value may remain close to face value. But if it has remarkable preservation or a confirmed mint-made error, then it becomes much more interesting to the collector market. And always remember that coin prices change according to grade, certification, color designation, error or variety, authenticity, eye appeal, and actual auction demand. The figures discussed here are market references and documented examples, not a guarantee that every 1975D Lincoln cent will sell for those amounts. So before spending that old penny, turn it over, check the date, find the D-mint mark, inspect the details, and you might discover something worth adding to your collection next up. The 1976D Lincoln Memorial Cent is an interesting United States 1 cent coin because it was struck during one of the most historically important years in American history, the bicentennial year of 1976, when the United States celebrated 200 years of independence. At first glance, this coin may look like an ordinary penny, but its date connects it directly to a major moment in American history. The Lincoln Memorial Cent series had already been in production since 1959, when the reverse design showing the Lincoln Memorial replaced the famous wheat reverse. The 1976 cent was struck at the Denver Mint, identified by the small d mint mark beneath the date. More than 4.22 billion 1976 cents were produced, so the regular issue is not considered rare simply because of its age. However, coin collecting is not only about how many pieces were originally produced. Collectors also look at condition, color, strike quality, errors, varieties, and whether an individual example survived decades with exceptionally well-preserved surfaces. That is where an ordinary-looking 1976 penny can become much more interesting. If you have one in nice condition, it is worth examining carefully rather than assuming that every 1976 cent has the same value. The design of the 1976 Lincoln Memorial Cent continues the historic Lincoln cent tradition. On the obverse is the familiar portrait of President Abraham Lincoln, with the inscriptions Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date 1976. Directly below the date is the important D mint mark, indicating that the coin was struck at Denver. On the reverse is the famous Lincoln Memorial, surrounded by the inscriptions United States of America, EPLURBUSUNUM, and 1 cent. The reverse was designed by Frank Gasparo, who played a major role in American coin design during the 20th century. PCGS identifies the 1976 cent as a 19mm copper alloy coin, weighing about 3.11 grams, with a plain edge. One fascinating feature for collectors is the tiny detail inside the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. On properly struck examples, the tiny representation of Lincoln's statue can sometimes be seen between the memorial's columns. Collectors examine these details because strong, sharp definition can help distinguish a well-preserved coin from one that experienced significant circulation wear. There is another reason the 1976 cent attracts attention: the year itself. The United States was celebrating its 200th anniversary, and the mint produced famous bicentennial designs for the quarter, half dollar, and dollar. The Lincoln cent, however, retained its normal memorial design rather than receiving a special bicentennial reverse. This creates an interesting contrast for collectors. You can have a 1976 Lincoln cent with a completely traditional design, while the nation around it was celebrating an extraordinary historical milestone. Billions of cents were needed for everyday commerce, meaning these coins circulated through stores, banks, vending machines, cash registers, and pockets across the country. Most were handled extensively, scratched, toned, or exposed to environmental conditions. As a result, finding a 1970-60 cent with exceptionally clean surfaces, attractive original color, strong details, and minimal contact marks can be considerably more interesting than finding a heavily circulated example. The important lesson is that the date alone does not make the coin rare. Instead, the combination of preservation and unusual characteristics is what can make a particular specimen stand out. One of the most important things to understand about the 1970-60 Lincoln Memorial cent is its composition. The regular 1970-60 cent was made from the traditional copper-alloy composition used before the major 1982 transition to copper-plated zinc cents. PCGS lists the 1970-60 cent as 95% copper and 5% zinc, with a standard weight of approximately 3.11 grams. This copper composition gives surviving examples a different appearance from later zinc cents. When a coin is freshly struck and remains protected from oxidation, it can retain attractive reddish color. Professional grading services commonly describe Lincoln cent color as brown BN, red-brown RB, or red RD. In general, a genuinely attractive red example in a very high mint state grade can command a premium over an ordinary brown circulated coin. However, collectors should be careful with artificially brightened or cleaned coins. A coin that has been polished may look shiny, but can actually be less desirable because cleaning can damage the original surface. For a collector searching for value, natural color, original luster, strong strike, clean fields, and minimal marks are all important factors. So what exactly should you look for if you believe your 1970-60 penny might be worth more than 1 cent? The first thing is condition. A heavily circulated coin with scratches, stains, corrosion, and flattened details generally has little collector premium. A coin that appears nearly untouched is a different story. Look closely at Lincoln's cheek, jaw, hair, coat, and the open fields around his portrait. On the reverse, examine the Lincoln Memorial, columns, steps, lettering, and open areas for contact marks. Next, check the coin's color and luster. A high-grade red specimen with attractive surfaces can be much more desirable than a brown example of the same date and mint mark. Professional grading can also become important when a coin appears exceptionally nice, because a certified high-grade example can be easier for collectors to compare and trust. PCGS records a high auction result of $1,265 for a 1970-60 BN example graded MS60. Demonstrating that exceptional or unusual market circumstances can produce prices far above normal circulated values. But this should not be interpreted as the normal value of every 1970-60 penny. Auction records represent individual transactions, and the exact grade, color, certification, eye appeal, and market conditions matter enormously. Now let's talk about the part that every collector wants to know. How much could a 1970-60 Lincoln Memorial cent be worth today? The answer depends heavily on condition. Current reference information shows that ordinary examples are generally worth very little above face value, while uncirculated pieces can bring a modest premium. USA Coin Book's February 2026 estimate places a 1970-60 Lincoln Memorial cent at around $1.24 or more in uncirculated MS condition, although actual selling prices can differ. Numista's current reference data likewise shows relatively low values for many grades, while PCGS records demonstrate that unusually high-grade or otherwise exceptional pieces can perform much better. This is why it would be misleading to say that every nice 1970-60 penny is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. Hundreds or thousands of dollars would require an exceptional specimen, unusual error, major variety, extraordinary grade, or a particularly strong auction result, not simply the fact that the coin is from 1976. If your coin is a normal circulated example, it may remain close to face value. If it is a spectacular certified mint state coin, however, the situation can be very different. Another area that can potentially change the value is the presence of a genuine mint error or recognized variety. Collectors may examine the 1970-60 cent for unusual doubling, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, die-related abnormalities, missing design details caused by striking problems, or other authentic mint errors. But this is where caution becomes extremely important. Damage that happened after the coin left the mint is not automatically a valuable mint error. Scratches, dents, machine damage, discoloration, corrosion, polishing, and other forms of post-mint damage can sometimes look unusual but generally do not create major numismatic value. The safest approach is to compare the coin with reliable references, and if something genuinely unusual appears, consider obtaining an opinion from a qualified coin dealer or professional grading service. Do not clean the coin before evaluation. Cleaning can permanently alter the original surface and may reduce collector desirability. Also remember that the tiny D beneath the date is the actual Denver Mint mark. Other small letters or initials on the reverse should not automatically be mistaken for a mint mark. Proper identification is one of the most important steps before assigning a value. The 1976 D Lincoln Memorial Cent is a perfect example of why coin collecting can be exciting. More than 4 billion were struck at Denver, so the ordinary coin is not a rarity simply because it has reached about half a century in age. Yet individual examples can still attract attention when they have exceptional preservation, beautiful natural color, strong strike quality, unusual errors, or outstanding certified grades. As of 2026, realistic market values range from essentially face value for common circulated pieces to modest premiums for attractive uncirculated examples, while exceptional certified coins or genuine major errors can reach substantially higher prices. The important message for viewers is not to believe that every 1976 penny is automatically worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. Instead, learn how to identify the date, confirm the D-Mint mark, inspect the surfaces, understand the copper composition, check the color designation, and compare actual market records. If you discover an unusually high-grade coin or a potentially genuine mint error, that is when professional evaluation may be worthwhile. So before spending your old 1976 D Lincoln Memorial Cent, take a second look, because although most examples are common, the hunt for that unusually preserved or truly unusual specimen is exactly what makes coin collecting so fascinating. Next up, the 1979 D Lincoln Memorial 1-cent coin, a United States penny that is now more than 4 decades old. At first glance, this coin may look like an ordinary piece of pocket change, but collectors know that small details such as the date, mint mark, condition, color, strike quality, and unusual errors can make a major difference in a coin's collectible value. The 1979 D cent was struck at the Denver Mint, and the small D mint mark below the date identifies its place of production. According to PCGS Coin Facts, the Denver Mint produced 4,139,357,254 Lincoln cents in 1979, making this a very large production issue rather than a scarce coin in ordinary circulated grades. The Lincoln Memorial Reverse had been introduced 2 decades earlier, in 1959, replacing the famous wheat reverse that had appeared on Lincoln cents since 1909. The memorial design was created by Frank Gasparo, while Abraham Lincoln's portrait on the obverse originated from Victor David Brenner's classic design. The 1979 D therefore belongs to an important period in American coinage history, when the Lincoln cent had already become one of the most familiar coins in everyday American commerce. For collectors today, its greatest appeal is not simply its age, but the possibility of finding an unusually well-preserved example, a high-grade red coin, or a genuine minting error or variety. That is why a 1979 D penny should not automatically be dismissed just because billions were produced. Before talking about value, it is important to know exactly what coin you have. The 1979 D Lincoln Memorial Cent measures approximately 19 millimeters in diameter, weighs about 3.11 grams, and has a plain edge. The standard 1979 D issue was made from a copper-based composition listed by PCGS as 95% copper and 5% zinc, and it belongs to the long-running Lincoln Memorial Cent series. On the obverse you should see Abraham Lincoln facing right, with the inscriptions Liberty and In God We Trust, along with the date 1979. Directly below the date, the D-Mint mark indicates Denver production. On the reverse is the familiar Lincoln Memorial Building, surrounded by the inscriptions United States of America, EPLURBUSUNUM, and 1 cent. If your coin has no mint mark, it is not the Denver issue. Philadelphia cents from this period generally carried no mint mark. If your coin has an S, it points to San Francisco production, although proof issues are a separate category. This distinction is extremely important when making a YouTube coin value video, because 2 pennies from the same year can have different production histories and collectible characteristics. A 1979 D in ordinary circulated condition is generally not a rare coin, but an exceptional example can be much more interesting. Collectors should therefore examine the date and mint mark carefully before deciding that a coin is merely worth its face value. Now let's discuss the condition specified for this coin, fine condition. In coin grading, fine generally means the coin has experienced noticeable circulation wear, but major design elements remain visible. On a Lincoln memorial cent, a fine-grade example will normally show wear across Lincoln's portrait, hair, cheek, jaw, and other raised portions of the obverse. On the reverse, the Lincoln memorial and lettering should remain identifiable, although some of the finer details may be softened by years of handling. A coin's exact grade should not be determined simply by looking at one photograph or by comparing it with another penny. Professional grading considers many factors, including surface preservation, strike quality, wear, color, damage, and overall eye appeal. For the ordinary 1970-90, fine condition does not normally place the coin into the hundreds or thousands of dollars category. In fact, published value information shows that the standard issue is common in circulated grades because of its enormous mintage. PCGS estimates a very large surviving population and describes examples through MS66 as readily available, while MS67 examples become scarce and higher grades become increasingly difficult to find. This is an important point for viewers. The phrase rare coin should not automatically mean that every 1970-90 cent is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. The real opportunity comes from finding a coin with characteristics that separate it from the millions of ordinary examples. One of the most important factors affecting the value of a 1970-90 Lincoln cent is its condition and color designation. Collectors commonly encounter Lincoln cents described as brown, red-brown, or red. A circulated fine-condition coin will normally show significant evidence of handling and may have lost much of its original bright copper color. A high-grade uncirculated example, especially one retaining strong original red color, can command substantially more collector interest. This is where the difference between a normal circulated 1970-90 and an elite quality example becomes dramatic. PCGS lists separate categories for brown, red-brown, and red examples, demonstrating that color is an important part of how these cents are evaluated. For example, published market information from Newmaster/CDN shows relatively modest prices at many lower uncirculated grades, followed by much higher levels at grades such as MS66 and MS67. This tells us something important about the 1970-90. Its value is driven much more by exceptional preservation than by simple age. A 1979 penny is old enough to attract collectors, but it is not automatically rare merely because it is over 40 years old. If your example is genuinely fine, expect the value to be far closer to ordinary collector market levels than to the spectacular prices sometimes associated with elite certified coins. However, if you discover a coin that appears nearly flawless, has strong original red color, sharp details, and no significant marks, that is when professional grading may become worthwhile. Another major reason a common-date Lincoln cent can become valuable is the presence of a genuine mint error or recognized variety. When searching a 1970-90, collectors should examine the date, mint mark, lettering, rims, Lincoln's portrait, and the reverse design carefully. Look for unusual doubling that appears to be part of the minting process rather than damage, dramatic off-center strikes, clipped planchets, broad strikes, die cracks, missing design elements, or other authenticated mint-made abnormalities. However, viewers should be extremely careful because ordinary circulation damage can look unusual. Scratches, dents, machine doubling, corrosion, environmental damage, plating or chemical discoloration, and altered mint marks are not automatically valuable errors. The standard 1970-90 issue itself was produced in enormous quantities, over 4.1 billion pieces, so rarity must come from something that genuinely distinguishes the coin from the normal population. This is also why professional authentication can be important when a supposed error appears extremely valuable. Collectors should never assume that a strange-looking penny is worth thousands of dollars simply because it has an unusual mark. The strongest evidence comes from recognized varieties, documented auction appearances, reputable grading services, and comparable sales of coins with the same characteristics. So, how much can a 1970-90 Lincoln memorial cent actually be worth today? The answer depends heavily on grade, color, certification, and whether the coin has a genuine variety or error. For an ordinary fine-condition 1970-90, there is generally no basis for claiming a value of hundreds or thousands of dollars simply because it is a 1970-90. Published market guides show much more modest values for normal examples, While exceptional certified coins can bring significantly higher amounts, the major jump occurs in extremely high grades. PCGS records an auction result of $763.75 for a 1970-90 graded MS67, sold at a Heritage Auctions event in June 2014. PCGS also reports an auction record of $3,995 for a 1970-90 MS67 Plus Red, sold through Heritage Auctions on February 4, 2016. These results demonstrate why collectors sometimes talk about a 1970-90 cent being worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars, but those prices belong to exceptional, professionally graded coins, not ordinary fine-condition pieces. In other words, a circulated 1970-90 and an elite MS67 Plus Red example may look like the same penny to an inexperienced observer, yet their market values can be dramatically different. This is the question many viewers are waiting for. Could your 1970-90 Lincoln Memorial penny really be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars? The honest answer is yes, but only under specific circumstances. A normal circulated fine-condition coin is not expected to command a huge premium simply because of its date and D-mint mark. The possibility of much higher value comes when the coin has an extraordinary grade, exceptional original red color, a rare and authenticated variety, or a significant mint error. PCGS population and auction information shows that the 1970-90 becomes much more difficult to find in the very highest grades, with MS67 examples described as scarce and coins above that level as very scarce to rare. This is why condition is so important. If you are searching through an old collection, coin jar, roll of cents, or inherited group of pennies, don't focus only on the date. Examine the surfaces under good lighting, look for signs of cleaning, check whether the original color remains, and inspect the coin for unusual mint-made characteristics. Never clean a potentially valuable coin, because cleaning can permanently damage the surfaces and reduce collector value. If the coin appears exceptionally sharp and well preserved, placing it in a protective holder and seeking an expert opinion can be a much better choice than polishing or altering it. In conclusion, the 1970-90 Lincoln Memorial 1-cent coin is an interesting piece of American numismatic history, but its value needs to be presented realistically. More than $4.1 billion was struck at Denver, so the ordinary 1970-90 is common rather than rare. A fine-condition example generally should not be advertised as a guaranteed hundreds or thousands of dollars coin. However, the story becomes much more exciting when you find an exceptionally preserved specimen, particularly one with strong original red color, an extremely high certified grade, or a legitimate and documented mint error. Auction evidence proves that top-grade examples have reached hundreds and even thousands of dollars, including the reported $3,995 auction record for an MS67 Plus Red example. So if you have a 1970-90 penny, don't throw it away, but don't assume it is automatically a fortune either. Check the mint mark, examine the condition, study the surfaces, compare it with reliable grading information, and investigate any unusual characteristics carefully. And remember, market prices can change depending on grade, certification, color, variety, authenticity, demand, and actual auction results. The figures discussed in this video are reference market information and past sales examples, not a guarantee that every 1970-90 Lincoln Memorial cent will sell for those amounts. The real treasure hunt is finding the exceptional coin hiding among the ordinary ones. Thanks for watching.